From the moment Dean Ambrose stepped foot into WWE, it was evident that he possessed an uncontainable energy, a raw presence that set him apart from the rest of the roster. His unique style, both in the ring and on the microphone, captured the imagination of fans worldwide. However, what should have been a legendary run under the WWE umbrella instead became a cautionary tale of what happens when a wrestler's creative instincts are stifled by an unyielding corporate machine. Vince McMahon, the omnipresent force behind WWE's creative direction, played an instrumental role in shaping the downfall of Ambrose within the company. Arriving in WWE's developmental territory, Florida Championship Wrestling, FCW, Ambrose had already built a reputation for himself on the independent circuit. His promo skills, heavily inspired by a blend of realism and unpredictability, made him stand out. Yet, despite the potential that WWE had in its grasp, early signs indicated that Vince McMahon's vision for Dean Ambrose did not align with the raw, unfiltered performer that fans had grown to admire. Instead of embracing the essence of Ambrose's character, WWE sought to mold him into something more digestible for mainstream audiences, chipping away at the very identity that made him special. The Shield's debut in 2012 marked Ambrose's introduction to the main roster. Alongside Seth Rollins and Roman Reigns, he formed a trio that would go on to define an era of WWE programming. During this period, the group was given a level of creative freedom that allowed their natural chemistry and intense in-ring style to flourish. But even within this faction, Ambrose's fiery promos were often edited or reshaped to fit a more sanitized narrative. While the group was dominant, it became increasingly clear that Vince McMahon saw Roman Reigns as the breakout star, positioning him as the future of the company, while Ambrose and Rollins played secondary roles. As the Shield disbanded, WWE had an opportunity to launch Ambrose as one of its top babyfaces. His erratic, unhinged persona resonated with fans who saw him as a breath of fresh air compared to the formulaic stars WWE had historically pushed. However, rather than allowing his character to evolve naturally, WWE's creative team, under McMahon's directive, began scripting Ambrose in ways that betrayed the core of his persona. Instead of the dangerous, rebellious brawler, he was transformed into a watered-down version of himself, with comedic elements shoehorned into his act. One of the clearest examples of WWE's mishandling of Ambrose came in the form of the infamous hot dog cart segment. At a time when Ambrose was meant to be perceived as a legitimate threat to Seth Rollins, he was instead given segments where he poured condiments on his rival, turning a heated rivalry into something cartoonish. This was symptomatic of a larger issue within WWE, where the company would often push comedic elements onto characters who thrived in more serious roles, stripping them of their legitimacy. Despite these setbacks, Ambrose still managed to connect with the audience in ways that WWE's preferred stars often struggled to do. The fans saw through the forced humor and embraced his organic charisma. This was evident when he won the WWE Championship in 2016, a moment that felt earned through years of perseverance. Yet, even as champion, Ambrose was never treated as the company's true top guy. Unlike his former Shield counterparts, he wasn't given the same marketing push, wasn't featured as prominently in advertisements, and was often booked in a manner that suggested WWE didn't see him as a long-term centerpiece. Vince McMahon's influence over Ambrose's character became even more apparent as time went on. Instead of allowing him to tap into the qualities that made him a standout performer, McMahon's vision leaned heavily into gimmicks that made him appear ridiculous rather than compelling. The turning point for many fans was Ambrose's heel turn in 2018. Rather than presenting a compelling, layered villain, WWE saddled him with absurd segments, including one where he received multiple vaccinations because he considered the audience dirty. What should have been a serious transformation turned into a comedic farce, undermining the gravity of his betrayal against Rollins. The creative frustrations reached a boiling point for Ambrose. He had given years of his career to WWE, adhering to scripts that made little sense, yet he found himself increasingly disillusioned by the direction of his character. McMahon's iron grip on creative decisions meant that even when Ambrose had suggestions that could have benefited his persona, they were often dismissed in favor of ideas that adhered to WWE's formulaic storytelling. Ambrose's exit from WWE in 2019 wasn't just a departure, it was an act of creative liberation. His post-WWE interview on Chris Jericho's podcast shed light on the oppressive nature of McMahon's control over talent. He detailed the frustrations of having to fight against nonsensical promos, being forced into embarrassing segments, and ultimately feeling like WWE had no interest in allowing him to be the performer he knew he could be. Upon leaving WWE and re-emerging as Jon Moxley in AEW, it became evident just how much he had been held back. In AEW, he was free to cut unscripted promos, wrestle matches that reflected his intense style, and engage in feuds that had authentic storytelling. His success post-WWE served as an indictment of McMahon's rigid creative structure, proving that Ambrose was never the problem. WWE's insistence on micromanaging every aspect of a performer's presentation was. The tale of Dean Ambrose in WWE is one of immense potential being squandered by a system that refuses to adapt. Vince McMahon's vision for what makes a successful superstar often clashed with what modern audiences gravitate toward. Instead of nurturing Ambrose's natural strengths, WWE sought to force him into a mold that simply didn't fit. His departure and subsequent resurgence elsewhere serve as a stark reminder that sometimes, the biggest obstacle a wrestler faces isn't the opponents in the ring, but the corporate machinery controlling the narrative. The irony of the entire situation is that Ambrose's departure did little to change WWE's creative process. The same restrictive environment that drove him away continued to affect other wrestlers who found themselves in similar creative purgatory. However, his success outside of WWE opened the door for discussions about how the wrestling industry should operate. It showed that a performer didn't have to conform to one man's vision to be successful. Ultimately, Ambrose's story is a cautionary tale about the dangers of creative suppression. WWE had a once-in-a-generation talent on their hands, someone who connected with audiences in a way that few could, yet they continuously misused him. Vince McMahon's refusal to embrace what made Ambrose special ultimately led to his exit, and in doing so, WWE lost one of its most passionate and authentic performers. His post-WWE career stands as a testament to the idea that true creativity cannot be contained, no matter how tightly corporate hands try to grasp it. When Dean Ambrose left WWE in 2019, it marked the end of an era and the beginning of an entirely new chapter in his career as Jon Moxley. His departure was fueled by frustrations with creative decisions, a desire for greater creative freedom, and a longing to rediscover his passion for professional wrestling. Over the years, Moxley has become one of the most recognizable figures in wrestling outside of WWE, cementing himself as a top star in AEW, and making waves in promotions like NJPW and GCW. However, in the ever-changing landscape of professional wrestling, returns are always possible, and speculation about a Dean Ambrose return to WWE has never truly faded. If Ambrose were to come back, it would be a momentous event, one that could shake up the industry and lead to numerous intriguing possibilities. The manner of his return would be one of the most critical aspects. WWE is known for creating dramatic comebacks, and Ambrose's would need to be no different. He could return in a surprise fashion, perhaps interrupting a major match or appearing unexpectedly after a shocking storyline twist. If WWE wanted to make his return even grander, they could tease it over several weeks, dropping cryptic messages and vignettes that allude to his arrival without outright revealing it. This method would build anticipation and have fans eagerly waiting for the moment he finally steps back into a WWE ring. One of the biggest questions surrounding his return would be his alignment. Would he come back as a babyface, receiving a hero's welcome from fans who missed him? Or would he emerge as a vengeful heel with a grudge against WWE for his past treatment? If he were to return as a face, he could immediately set his sights on major stars like Seth Rollins, Cody Rhodes, or even Roman Reigns, reigniting old rivalries while forging new ones. His underdog nature and anti-authority persona would naturally make him a beloved figure, and WWE could position him as a top challenger for any of the world championships. On the other hand, a heel return could be equally compelling. He could claim that he left WWE to prove a point, only to find that nothing had changed in his absence. He could blame the fans for turning their backs on him, or argue that he's back to take over the company by force. This direction would allow him to showcase his unhinged and unpredictable side, a characteristic that made him so popular in the first place. Aligning him with a powerful faction, or placing him as a lone wolf with a destructive agenda could make him one of the most dangerous figures in WWE. His first feud would be pivotal in setting the tone for his return. a natural choice would be Seth Rollins, given their extensive history as both partners and rivals. Their feud has always been filled with deep personal animosity, and adding another chapter to their story would be a surefire way to generate interest. Alternatively, he could immediately go after Roman Reigns, challenging the tribal chief and staking his claim as a rightful leader. A feud between Ambrose and Reigns would have the potential to be one of the most intense rivalries in modern WWE, especially given the evolution of Reigns' character since Ambrose's departure. Beyond the bloodline, there are numerous dream matches that could become reality. Facing Cody Rhodes, who himself returned to WWE after time away, would be a compelling clash between two men who sought to redefine themselves outside the company. A match against LA Knight would give fans a fresh, unpredictable contest between two charismatic yet rugged stars. Another fascinating possibility would be a feud with Gunther, whose hard-hitting style could match Ambrose's brawling nature perfectly. Ambrose's return would also impact WWE's creative direction. His past frustrations stemmed from scripted promos and overly controlled storytelling, but with WWE undergoing changes under Triple H's creative leadership, there may be a greater openness to his style of improvisation and raw authenticity. If given the freedom to express himself in promos, Ambrose could elevate his character and breathe new life into WWE's storytelling. The name Dean Ambrose may be confined to WWE's history, but the man behind it, Jon Moxley, continues to prove that his story is far from over. While WWE may have sought to mold him into their vision of what a superstar should be, he has carved his own path, showing that success comes not from compliance, but from staying true to oneself. The ultimate tragedy isn't that Dean Ambrose failed in WWE, it's that WWE failed Dean Ambrose.